Hey everyone, it's Mike, your safety guy with NextTech, and this is the Service Call Podcast. This is a show where we talk about the people who actually keep the lights on, the air running, and the job moving forward. But the show goes beyond our industry to explore resilience, leadership, and lessons from people who answer the call to serve. We'll feature techs, leaders, and a few wild cards, and real stories from the field, the shop, and everywhere in between. No corporate scripts, no sales pitch, just real conversations with people who know what it means to show up and get it done. Let's roll. So hey everybody, welcome back. We have a new one for you today. We have Al Clark on the phone. He is a Senior Vice President of Electrical and Lighting for NextTech. If you didn't know, this podcast is powered by NextTech. You can find out more information about us at NextTechNA, meaning NextTechNorthAmerica.com. That's NextTechNA.com. And if you're a tradesperson and you're looking for a job and you're thinking, well, do they got careers for me? Do they have opportunities for me? We absolutely do. Please, again, go to NextTechNA.com, look under the careers tab, and you'll see all sorts of information there, how to upload your resume, how to get our job placement division to get a hold of you. And you can do so by going to our website at nexttechna.com. Again, nexttechna.com. So Al Clark is on the phone with me, and Al and I have known each other for almost 11 years.
It's been a long time.
It is. And I went to work for Al for a short time in St. George, Utah. We were both working for the same, RCA Holdings, I think it was?
Yeah, RCA Holdings, Core Refrigeration, Ace Electrical.
And I was on the RCA Holdings side, and I had actually met Al before that, I think, at a NASCAR event. Didn't I go to a NASCAR? And
one of our vendors, I can't remember who it was. Yeah, that's right. Copeland sent us to Las Vegas, and we got to go sit in the booth and go tour the cars in the pits, and that was kind of fun.
It was that Cobalt. It was the Cobalt NASCAR event, and me personally, completely different Mike then, was really drunk. And I remember sitting in the back of the bus being a complete a-hole, but having a great time. And I met the guys, and then we started a conversation, and an opportunity came up for me to live the dream, which was my wife and I's dream, to live in St. George, Utah. And Al was part of that process for me to get the job at Core RC Holdings. But as luck would have it, it's an odd chain of events, but I ended up not being a fit at the time, just didn't work out. And I was ready to go, and Al and I weren't ready to separate, but we knew that it was a business decision, and it was the most unusual separation because we actually ended up becoming very good friends. And instead of some boss relationships falling apart after they leave, we stayed intact.
Yeah. Listen, we gained a friendship there, and sometimes in business things work out and sometimes they don't, and it's not anybody's fault. Sometimes circumstances are different, and in this industry and in this business, it's better to have friends than enemies. So I've always been one to want to hold on to that friendship, and Mike's very easy to like, very easy to get along.
Well, tell us about you, because I know about you through work, but I don't know about your back. And we've talked about your background, but when did you get in the trade? How long have you been in the trade? How did you know somebody who was a tradesperson? Did you have family members? Tell us about you.
So my grandfather, when I graduated high school and was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, my grandfather on my mother's side, he told me, he said, listen, you should go to school and get a degree. He said, but learn a trade, whether it's concrete, framing, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, refrigeration, whatever it is. He says, you might not always need an investment banker or a venture capitalist if all the world goes to crap. But if you know how to wire up someone's house or fix the switches or replace a furnace or whatever, he says, you'll always have work and you'll always have money. So I got enrolled in school, and then I got an Associate's of Applied Science in Electricity. My grandpa was actually an electrician in the Navy. So I thought, well, electricity doesn't scare me too bad, so I'll try that out. And I went to school, did some business classes, and got my associates in electricity, and then ended up getting my journeyman, and ended up just liking electrical and kind of stuck with that. Did that got my journeyman, and then I had a good friend that was building homes back in 2004, 2005. And he kind of told me at that point I'd worked for the same company pretty much for most of my career. And that company sold to another company. And I went over there, didn't really love the new situation. And a close friend of mine said, hey, I'm building houses in St. George. Why don't you come help me with that? And so I went down to St. George, and we started a little construction business, building high-end homes in Entrada and the cliffs down in St. George. Did that for a few years until the infamous 2007, 2008, when all the economy dropped out in the housing market. And we didn't really lose anything because all we did was pre-sold homes, but we just stopped having work. So I was just looking for work, and one of the guys in my neighborhood worked at Costco. And he said, hey, there's a refrigeration company down here that hire electricians all the time. Maybe you got to talk to them. And so I thought, all right, maybe I'll do that. Well, that night, the service manager for Robinson Refrigeration called me and kind of gave me a spill about what they were doing and how they could use an electrician on staff and maybe even start an electrical division inside of that company. And so it intrigued me. So he said that the owner of the company was out hunting and wouldn't be back for a month or two, but that he would hire me on as just an electrician. So he hired me on. I worked for them for 3 or 4 months until the owner came back into town. And it was kind of a funny story, but we were working all nights at a grocery store doing a big change out for the refrigeration lineup. And I got home and went to bed. And as soon as I about got to sleep, I got a phone call from the service manager. Said, hey, owner's in town, but he's leaving again for another hunt. So, can you meet today? So I threw on some clothes and went over to the Village Inn to meet the service manager and the owner. And I walked in, they were sitting in a booth, and the owner looked at me and says, where's your effing uniform? And I said, well, I like your gray t-shirts, but I don't wear them on my own time. So anyway, we sat down and chatted, and he asked me what I thought, what I thought I could bring to the table. And I told him that he'd got a great refrigeration company, and I thought that I could, work on building up the electrical for him, bring my master's license to the table. And he asked me what I wanted out of that. And I said, well, I'd like to get paid at least what a journeyman electrician was getting paid, because he was only paying me $19 an hour. I said, and then whatever, the electrical, I'll build it and grow it, and whatever, maybe give me 10% of the profits at the end of the year. And he said, no, he said, I'll just pay as I think you're worth it, but I need you to sign your license over to me for 6 years if we're going to do this. And yeah, so I kind of knew that wasn't going to work. And I just said, well, let me think about it. And over the next few days, he wanted me to sign a non-compete for not lifting a tool in the St. George area. I wouldn't sign it because I wasn't getting paid very much, and I didn't have a deal. So anyway, about a week later, he kind of pulled me in and said, I need you to sign this non-compete. And I said, well, I do electrical, I don't do refrigeration, and I don't feel comfortable signing that, and I'm not going to sign my license over to you for 6 years. So we ended up shaking hands, and I said, you got a great business, wish you luck. And he says, you're a great electrician. Sorry it's not going to work out. So no big deal. So I just went home and got home, and there was a guy in my neighborhood, another guy that I was close friends with, and I was sitting at his pool and kind of telling him the story, what was going on. And he asked me, he said, why don't you just start your own business? I said, well, I've been living off of my savings for the past year and a half because of the economy, so I don't have a whole lot of money. And he said, well, what if money wasn't an issue? And I thought that was the craziest thing anyone's ever told to me. And I've come to find out he had a lot of money. He was one of those very humble, rich guys that you wouldn't know that he had a lot of money. And so he said, well, why don't we just start an electrical business down here and see where it goes? And one of the guys that I worked with while I was at that refrigeration company that I'd gotten to be kind of friends with, he called me and he was upset that, they had let me go. And I said, well, oddly enough, I just talked to my neighbor and we're going to start an electrical company. And he's like, well, what if I start with you and we do refrigeration as well? I said, that sounds like a great idea. So we met at Carl's Jr. in St. George, Utah, and concocted a plan to start what eventually ended up being Core Refrigeration and Ace Electrical through a bunch of other weird paths that we probably don't have time to get into. Anyway, I moved up to Salt Lake, and all the other guys stayed down there. We ended up selling part of the business to another refrigeration company, and then starting over again and building it back up, and then eventually, sold the company a couple of years ago to Nextech, Aries Holdings, and that's where we are now.
Well, it's so weird. You mentioned that one guy about not having the money, because I know who that is, and you are right. Like, he was the most humble man, and nice and kind, and didn't ever come across as being, I wish I could say his name because he deserves to be recognized, but we won't. But, I wanted to, the guy that we're talking about, that you talked about making, the money was no object. He's a terrific human being. And I remember when I used to go to his office was very tiny. It was like in a closet, and it was enough for 2 desks. And I'd say, God, why don't you have like a huge office? He's, what, why do I need a big, I need my people taken care of, my employees taken care of, not me. And it was such a weird way of doing business, but he's such a terrific person and a terrific man. And is he still doing well?
Yeah, he's actually serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Flagstaff, Arizona right now with his wife.
Oh, did they move there?
No, but he did sell his house in St. George, and he doesn't have a home. I was talking to him the other day, and when they'll serve for different amounts of time. I think he was on 1.5 years, but once that's done, he was asking where to live, and I told him he could come live in my basement if he wanted
to. So yeah, he's just a great guy, and he's so humble and so kind, and I'm glad that he's doing well. Yeah. When you got into the electrical part, and you were, your career up and down, the economy up and down, take it with it. Were you ever thinking to yourself like, this, Grandpa, I love you, but this is not going the way I thought? Or were you pretty well like, you know what, I'm going to ride this out, and I've got, I think of the question is, I'm strong enough in what I know that I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, I think I gained a love for what I do. When I remember when I first got into it, the first year or so, getting yelled at and screamed at by a journeyman, and having to carry his tools in the job sites. Things were a little different 30 years ago than they are today. But for the first little bit, I wasn't sure about it. But for some reason, I just loved the idea of giving a building life. When you go, you watch this empty ground. They come in with some backhoes. They put some concrete down. They put wood or steel up, and they build this building. And then we would go in there and we would run the veins and give the building life. When I left, the lights would be turned on. People would be plugging stuff in, and computers would be working. And for some reason, the thought of giving, bringing a building to life, I just liked it. And I became very into what I did. I loved the trade, the electrical trade. And as I got into refrigeration, I'm kind of known as the electrician at Nextech, but I think what people forget is I also did refrigeration and HVAC for 15 years. So that as well, just watching, making things work, and then also when things aren't working, fixing them, and then walking away from something knowing that you accomplished something in the day. And something tangible. You can walk out of an area and say, hey, I wired that, or I built that walk-in box, or I installed that HVAC unit, and people are comfortable now because of something that I did. It just brought me, comfort and peace. I like doing that. The feeling of accomplishment, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Have you had people come up to you and say, I see your success, you're an amazing person, how do I get into the trade? How do I become an apprentice? Like, what do you tell them? Do you have a secret? Do you have a way? Because you had your grandfather that really guided you into the direction of blue collar. How are you doing that?
So I've actually gone to some junior high schools and given some seminars in this and taught. I think one of the disservices that we do in the world today is that we look at blue collar sometimes as a second class citizen or not. You want to work white collar, and it's not for everybody. I mean, I went down the path of white collar first, and I didn't like it. I didn't like sitting in an office looking at spreadsheets and working on stuff like that. I love the idea of working with my hands and building that up. And there's a lot of kids out there today that's what they're driven to. And I think we do a disservice if we tell them that somehow that makes them any lesser of a person than someone that, sits behind a desk all day. And so I haven't in a while, but I used to go to junior highs and I talk to kids, and a lot of the kids in my neighborhood, I've brought 4 or 5 into, our company here, and a lot of them have been successful. A few of them, one went on to be a police officer and ended up going to the police academy. And a couple of them still work here, and I've had a couple others that, came in, got their journeyman, and then ended up going, other states and moving away and doing other things. But I've always been a proponent of, do what you love, find a way to make money at it. And, where else can you go where they're going to pay for your school? You get paid while you're going to school, you work, and at the end of it, you have a certificate, you have a degree, and you can go anywhere. I mean, as a journeyman electrician in the United States, you can go anywhere and find a job. Mm-hmm. HVAC journeyman, you can go anywhere and find a job. I mean, our recruiting woes just trying to find people and finding good people. And you'll never not have a job in the trades. Mm-hmm. If you want one, and if you're worth a damn, I guess.
So years ago, Thor had a little apartment in downtown Salt Lake City, or Sandy. I think the office was.
It was Murray. We bought we rented an apartment by our office because we had you coming up from St. George, and we had Eric would come up, and then even Troy and Ty would come up from St. George. So it was cheaper just to rent an apartment and furnish it than it was to pay for hotels every 4 times a week.
So I had this apartment, and I would stay there, and they would, and I had a great service area. I'll be honest. I mean, as a guy doing sales for the company, getting to travel to Rexburg, Idaho, and see Idaho really for the first time and drive the roads, and we need you to go to Boise or need to go to Idaho Falls. It's like, oh darn, horrible. But I remember,
I put you in a little Nissan Versa, though. You're a big man for that little car.
Well, it was either that or the Old Man Gold, and I was not driving Old Man Gold. Not.
Should I tell the story of Old Man Gold?
You should.
So we had our fleet company. We just kind of went down to Ford, and we had a fleet guy there who would just buy us vehicles. And we started the company. We were growing pretty good, and we were looking for, when we had opened up branches in, we had obviously Salt Lake, St. George, we had Idaho Falls, we had Boise, we had Phoenix, and Las Vegas. And so we'd have to travel, but a lot of times we wouldn't need a truck, and we just got tired of paying, ungodly amounts of money for fuel to go back and forth. Plus, it's not as comfortable. So I reached out to our fleet guy and said, "Hey, can you get us a sedan? Just something decent that we can drive around, that's comfortable, but doesn't need to have leather and cold air blowing up our butts or anything. Just something reasonable." So he calls me up a couple of days later and says, "Hey, I found this Ford Fusion. It's got cloth, it's got this, it does have cruise control, it's the better engine." And I said, "Okay, great." I said, "What color is it?" He says, "This tectonic silver." I said, "Great. That sounds great. How much is it?" "Great." I said, "Get it in. I'll take it." So a couple of weeks later or so, he calls me and says, "Hey, your Fusion's in." I said, "Great." So, that business partner we're talking about, Ty and I, we went over to the Ford dealership, walked right in, sat down, and pulled the paperwork out like we've done a bunch of times buying trucks and vans, and signed the paperwork and chatting with the guy, and got up and walked out. And we get out to the parking lot, and there's just one car sitting there. And I said, "Well, where's ours?" And he says, "That's yours." I said, "No, I ordered a silver one." He says, "Well, that's tectonic silver." I said, "No, that's freaking Old Man Gold." Full on gold sedan. We'd already signed for it and bought it. So from that day forward, that car was named Old Man Gold. Well, I don't think I said that's freaking Old Man Gold.
No, but they when I got there, they said you have your choice of 2 vehicles, and I was not taking the gold vehicle.
To be fair, I tinted the windows, and it didn't look quite as bad. And listen, once in a while, when the The sun wasn't quite down, the moon wasn't quite up, and the light hit it just right. It did look silver, but that is a gold car.
That's a gold car.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And so, that was my service area. Well, one day I stayed the weekend in Salt Lake. And instead of going back to St. George and staying where I was staying, I went to Salt Lake and stayed there for the weekend. And I think your second set of twins,
First set of twins.
First twins. So they'd be 11.
No, second set. It was the second set.
Yeah, it was a second set. And so, and you have how many sets of twins?
Too many.
Two too many. And so they were just born. And Al says, "You want to come over? We're gonna do the baptism,
Baby blessing."
baby blessing."
Yeah.
And so I got dressed, came over to the house, and the door opens up, and there's Al with a vacuum cleaner, and he's like, "Go vacuum the floors. You're the first one here. The house isn't ready." And I'm like, and I'm dressed up in slacks and a collared shirt, and he's like, just vacuum the floors. And I ended up working at his house, vacuuming the floors. Didn't even know his family. I don't think I'd met anybody but you. And immediately I'm vacuuming the floors. And so the blessing came, and I think I sat next to your father.
Yeah.
And his name is Kim?
Tim.
Is he still with us?
Yeah, he's still here. He's 82, but he's still kicking.
So I'm standing right next to Tim. I have no idea what's going to happen because I had been to baptisms before, but this was a blessing. And when they did the procedure and went through the motions, I am a bawling wreck. If I would have worn mascara, it would have been all down my face. I am bawling. And your father is looking at me, and I am bawling. And I says, "I've never been to this before. I've never seen this before." And he says, "Well, I won't hold it against you." And I'm bawling. And that's how I met your family. And I was a complete wreck, a grown man who was a complete wreck over a baby blessing.
Yeah, I remember I had to tell you to get a hold of yourself for something, if I remember.
Something, because and I'm pretty emotional. And I'm 6'4", I'm about 270, 275, so I'm not a small guy, and I'm bawling. And your father is looking at me like, "You've hired, who's this nut, and why is he in my house, and why is he next to me?" And I had just got done vacuuming the floors, and here I am bawling like an idiot. And I tell that story all the time about, "Oh, do you know Al?" "Oh, I know Al."
Yeah. No, it was a pleasure to have you in the house and be there for that. So, yeah, typically in the religion that I'm in, that when a baby's born, we do a priesthood blessing and just kind of bless it that it will have a good life, and get a bunch of people together and have a little ceremony. So it's a good thing.
It's a good thing. And it was a great thing. And I can close my eyes. I'm sitting here right now telling that story, and I think it was in your kitchen, dining room.
Yeah, we did it in the front room, but then we were all over the house because we had people over for food, and we had a little kind of a party for them.
Yeah, gosh, they're what, 11 years old now?
They are 10, yeah, almost 11. Yeah, crazy, huh?
It is crazy.
Yeah, my oldest daughter now has her first child, so I'm a grandpa now. Yeah, 26-year-old daughter and a 6-month-old granddaughter.
That can't be right.
I'm flies.
Oh, well, congratulations on the grandfather.
Oh, yeah, thanks. It's way better than being a father, I'll tell you that.
A boy or girl?
I love a girl. Magnolia May.
Congratulations. Well, I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And they're down in Texas, and they know exactly how to push Papa's buttons, and they manipulate me and love to. I get on the ground or on the couch, and they like to jump from the side of the couch onto me and cause me great pain, and I love every minute of it. Yeah. Apparently, I'm the first one to give my granddaughter pretty much everything. She had ice cream, and she sucks on Swedish fish and cookies, and
And my daughter said she hasn't had anything but milk. And I'm like, yeah, she has.
Grandpa ruined that one.
Yeah. I do what I want.
Let's break into a little technical talk.
Okay.
A lot of guys are going to be like, no, I'm done with the baby dog.
Yes.
What kind of tool guy are you? What kind of electrical tools do you like? What are your faves?
So I'll tell you, I was a DeWalt guy because that's all there was, years ago. I switched over and started buying some of the Milwaukee stuff, and I've become kind of a Milwaukee whore, as it were. I will say, and some of the DeWalt guys will be happy, I do think that DeWalt tools last longer, but I love the feel of the Milwaukee and the availability of, you can buy just about anything. So I'll peruse the internet and see some crazy off the wall thing and have to have it and still in the package because I'll probably never use it, but I had to have it because it's cool. So I screwdrivers and stuff, I'm usually Klein, just coming from the electrical world, all my strippers, linemen's, side cutters, all that's, I love the Klein, the way that they build them. I used to love it even more back when they were 100% covered under warranty, but they don't do that anymore. But yeah, I'm one of those that I'd like to have the right tool. I've got a trailer. When I got kind of pulled it more into the office and got a little older, I bought a trailer, filled it full of all the tools and some of the supplies I have. So about a year ago, we're always trying to maintain our ratios. In electrical, you have to have, for every journeyman, it's 1-to-1 for a journeyman apprentice. Some states 1-to-2, and other states. But we did a project in Wyoming, in Rawlins. It was a new gas station, and we just couldn't find the right people to hire. So all the journeymen in Wyoming are working at the mines and wanted $26 trillion a second. So I ended up hauling that trailer up there and living out of it on the job site so that we could stay in ratio. So I got a little office in there as well, but it's filled with all my tools, and all the guys were a little jealous. But I'm like, hey, in 30 years, start building up your tool set, and you'll have the same thing I have in enough time.
Okay. So then, knowing that you have all these Milwaukee tools, are you somebody who would rather do half, 3/4, 1-inch EMT, or do you like bring out the big press and the big benders?
So I don't think you should ever use half-inch EMT. I think it should always be 3/4 inch. We do have a lot of, big benders here because we do a lot of gas stations, and we do some work for, some large food plants and stuff. So we have, the big triple nickel benders. We have threaders. So we're doing gas stations. A lot of what we have to do is explosion-proof fittings. So we'll have to cut and thread our own pipes. So, here at ACE, we have a lot of that kind of equipment.
But you're also got into lighting, I believe, right? So now you're doing lighting upgrades, and you've got guys in bucket trucks doing overhead lighting, correct?
Yeah, so we do a lot of lighting maintenance. So, some of the big box stores and department stores will go in and do a lighting maintenance. We'll just walk the store, any light bulb that's out. Some of our clients still have the old T8 and, some of the high pressure sodium metal halides on the outside of the buildings, which some states they're illegal now. Other states like Utah, they're not. But so yeah, we'll do a lighting maintenance. We'll check the egress lighting. Every building, egress lighting is if the power goes out, they have to have a certain amount of foot candles to be able to get people to get in and out of the building. So we'll have to test that and then make sure we're replacing, battery backup ballasts, lamps, make sure the outside's safe with pole lights. And back east, we got a lot of guys running around in bucket trucks and bucket vans. And, when I get those hurricanes, you get down poles. Salt water will start eroding those light poles for parking lots over time. Wind blows them down, and we'll have to go cut them up and replace them, stuff like that.
It's going to be a horrible question to ask. As you've gotten older, has the trade changed in a positive way, or has it changed in a non-positive, meaning, social media, YouTube, because a lot of guys will use YouTube and HVAC refrigeration for their educational sides. Has it gotten that way, or is electrical still, you're going to have to bend, you're going to have to thread, you can do whatever you want to watch it on social media, that's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah, I think, in our trade, what changes a lot is, the National Electrical Code, the NEC, and that updates every few years, and they'll add more to it. And a lot of it's for safety, and I get that. Obviously, we want electricity to be as safe as possible. Sometimes I think they go a little too far in the safety matter, but I think the trade overall gets better every year. It gets safer. I mean, when I started out, we were expected to do more. Where now we have equipment and tools. I'm 52 years old, and my hands hurt when I work too much now because I had to use them more than these kids nowadays. We've got tools that help cut and help grip and strip and all the stuff that we used to have to do by hand. And we were expected to lift more. We now have, stuff that helps them lift. I used to set pole heads on pole lights, leaning a ladder against it and having to hoist it up with put it over my shoulder and climb up the pole and then shove the wire down. And now we have, equipment. So I think overall it's gotten better. It's gotten easier. As the old man in me says, all these kids are a bunch of 50s. They're not working super hard. But, the business owner in me says, I don't want anybody getting hurt. I never want to make that call to a family. So I'm grateful that, we're making things better.
In your time in the trade, you specifically and your businesses, did you ever have like an oh crap moment where somebody powers up, they rack in a breaker, arc flash? Have you had any of that? Or have you been pretty lucky because you are running a safe business and you've been able to stay away from it?
I'd say we've been pretty lucky. I can't think of anything where we've had anybody get hurt too bad. I guess I'm just trying to think back. I can't think of anything. There was an instance that I tell a lot of people this story because it's something that's dear to my heart, because I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't listened to that intuition or the whatever spirit in the back of your head. Me and my original business partner were working at a grocery store, and we were changing out 2 refrigeration compressors. And when I first, I did my career in electrical, and when I first got into refrigeration, it always amazed me that they had all these giant rack refrigeration systems, and they were above ground on mezzanines. I'm like, why do you have these, things that look like engines, and you have to replace them periodically, and you put them up on a mezzanine? It just didn't make any sense to me. But anyway, we had to replace 2 of them right after Christmas, and we got to the job and wheeled in the 2 new compressors, and you know what they look like. For those of you that don't, they look like a car engine, probably weigh around 300 pounds, 350 pounds. Anyway, the only way to get them up into the rack room is there was a I-beam and like a elevator shaft, and then we had a hoist up there. It was a 16,000 pound hoist or whatever, aircraft cable, big old thick aircraft cable. And you come down, and then each compressor has 2 eyelets that are molded into the body of the compressor. So you thread in it's like a 5/8 bolt, 2 of them. You thread them into the body of the compressor, and you hook your hoist on it, and then you slowly lower or raise them up to the mechanical room. So we get there, and we put the eyelets in the first one, and we start hoisting it up. And my business partner was hoisting it up, and I was pushing it out of the way and climbing up and taking our tools that we needed to, complete the changing these things out. So as he hoisted those up, I was pushing out of the way and climbing the ladder with all the tools. And anyway, we got them up there, put them on the cars, took them out, we were there for probably 14 hours straight, changed them out, and got done. We had to get the old ones down now. So we rolled the first one out to the edge of the mezzanine where it was going to drop, put the eyelets in it, put it on the hoist, lifted it out, and lowered it down. And as he was lowering it down, I was taking the tools down and putting them in the truck. And we got to the second compressor and put the eyelets in it, put it on the aircraft cable, and pushed it out over the edge of the shaft. And clear as day, I heard something say, "Don't go down that ladder." And I thought, that's stupid. We've been doing this all day long. And so I went to go down the ladder again, and clear as day, I heard something say, "Don't go down that ladder." So I looked at my business partner at the time and I said, I knew he was going to be pissed because he was tired and I was tired. And so I said, no, this sounds stupid. I said, I can't go down the ladder. So I said, you sit down, I'll lower the compressor and then I'll take the rest of the tools down after. But I said, I don't feel comfortable going down the ladder. And so he said, okay. And he went and sat on a bucket and I pushed that compressor over the edge and I hit that ratchet twice and both those eyelets sheared off and that thing dropped 30 feet. We had a 3-wheel cart at the bottom of it. It tacoed that cart. So I for sure would have been dead. Mm-hmm. So the one thing I would say to everybody out there is, man, if you feel something, just don't do it. Listen. Because I'm here today because I listened.
Wow. So you went with your gut?
Yeah, I went with my gut and saved my life. So we both looked at that and he looked at me and I'm like, that just happened. I said, yeah, that just happened.
Crazy.
Yeah. So, you guys are out there working, listen to your surroundings, think about what you're doing. One, we should have never been pushing the thing out of the way and gone up and down that ladder. But man, I'm sure glad that when it counted, I listened.
Well, I think we're going to end it with that story because that is definitely something to listen to your gut. If your gut feels it, don't do it. Even if you've got a supervisor or a foreman or somebody telling you, or a boss telling you, you do it. And if your gut says no, I'd go with your gut. We're talking to Al Clark. He is the Senior Vice President of Electrical and Lighting for Nextech. He's a good friend. He's a dear friend. I love him. He's got a wonderful family, and I can't thank him enough for being here and sharing his story. If you're interested in the podcast, please check us out on YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen or watch podcasts. Today's podcast is powered by Nextech. You can find out more about Nextech by going to nextechna.com. That's nextechna.com. And if you're interested in a job here, check us out on that website. There's a little careers link. It'll take you over and show you all the opportunities with Nextech. As always, I want to thank Al for being here. I appreciate him being here. And I appreciate all of you for listening. Again, this is the Service Call podcast powered by Nextech.